The ABC News special, which I guess ran a week ago, I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. It's a strange experience to be on a show like that. They contacted me early in the fall and said that I want to come and be on a show about new JFK files. So I sure, love to do that. I talked with the producer a little bit. It seemed like they were serious. And they said, we don't want to do a Zoom. We want to come to your house. So that's always nice. And I'm hospitable. I thought, well, come to my house. When they come to your house, they really like set it up like a studio. So it looks really nice. There's really nice lighting, um, you know. And so I like to be on a show that looks good. And I figured ABC is going to put on a show that looks good. And I believe them when they said, the JFK files, that's what they wanted to talk about. So, in retrospect, I wonder, was that naive? I didn't have high expectations, but I did have some expectations. So when I saw the show, I mean, you know, uh, it's terrible. I mean, journalistically defunct, not balanced, out of date, inaccurate. Just like, and not even really trying to do anything else. And so the to see that and to be part of that at first part, it's kind of dismaying because you know, Oliver and Jim DiEugenio and I, we were told that we were going to come on this show and talk about new JFK files. And they spent an hour with Oliver and Jim, and they spent at least an hour with me. And they didn't use it at all, really. I mean, they never really engaged with what we were saying. Most of the time is spent with Dale Meyer, a video animator, somebody who knows the case well, but whose recreation of the video recreation of the Dealey Plaza crime scene is out of date. And, it wouldn't have been hard to discover that. And at a minimum, compare what he did with the more recent version done by John Orr and Knight Labs. That would have been the journalistically responsible thing for ABC News to do. And, they didn't do that. And they didn't do that in a dozen different ways, where you look for the obvious reporting that needs to be done. And they didn't do it. It was upsetting. But when I thought about it after a while, I watched the show again because I thought I'd missed something. It went by too fast. I was like, wait, I thought I was quoted on the show, and I went back to see, and yeah, I was quoted.
3 seconds.
Yeah, like I should time it and see what it was because the comparison of how much time they spent with me to how much time they put me on the air, you know, it was pathetic. And I mean, and so when I went back and looked at it, I realized in a 2 hour show, I show up at 1:55. It's literally the last thing they wanted to talk about was the new JFK files.
Which is
And
what they
so,
promoted this about, right?
yeah, but I mean, but what they did, what they did makes it very clear. It's literally the last thing they want to talk about. So they feel the obligation to talk about it, and that's important. Like, so if you're going to have, do poor journalism, not care about journalism, ignore the facts, ignore balance, ignore fairness, then why put me on at all? Well, ABC News isn't stupid, right? They want to have a credible show. And if they do a show that makes no reference to the new files, they're not going to have a credible show. They're not stupid. They know that. That's why they invited us on. But they screwed us. They used us as props as opposed to, being sources for the show. So, that's like upsetting. But it's a compliment in a way. Now Oliver has written an angry note to ABC News, and I think somebody sent it to me.
Yeah,
And
it was on Facebook and we they circulated. But then bookending
yeah,
that, Jeff, was your piece following that about the David Ignatius piece.
yeah. So yeah, I want to get to that, but just I want to say one other thing. So Oliver wrote a note, and I understand why he's pissed off to Eileen Murphy. She's in charge of the thing, and she said, you used us as props. You didn't act in good faith. And, this is nothing new. You've always done this. And now you've done it again, so buzz off. Now, I understand why he's mad, but the argument, you're an asshole, you've always been an asshole, in my experience, that's not a very persuasive argument to anybody. I mean, it feels good and it might even be true, but that doesn't mean it's a good argument. And it doesn't mean it's going to accomplish anything. So I'm angry like Oliver, but I'm going to try and express it in a different way, which is I'm going to say to ABC, you guys said you wanted to do a show on the new JFK files. That's a really good idea. So why don't you do a show on the new JFK files? You've done one on the old stuff. You've done stuff on what Dale Myers said 20 years ago, and you've made, factually horrendous mistakes, like saying there's no evidence of a shot from the front, ignoring what all the doctors say. So do a real show. You can make up for those mistakes, those boneheaded mistakes, by doing a real show and at least listening to what we have to say. And then, bring on people who disagree with us and, let's talk about it. But to do this kind of show, it's a big way. So I don't have too many hopes that this is something that will convince ABC News to do another show. But I think it will, show people in the media that, there's a show to be done here, and ABC News didn't do it.
And Fox Nation did a good show.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think, so when ABC News called me, I said, okay, I was in Colorado writing my book. I said, look, network TV, I'm gonna break up my schedule. I'm gonna fly across the country. I'm gonna sit down and do this. And so I basically devoted 3 days to doing this 90-minute interview, of which they did about 8 seconds. So, was that worth it to fly across the country? Well, my attitude is, call me anything, just call me for dinner, like say whatever you want, okay? But if you invite me to the table, that's all I care about. And so that's what my message for ABC News. So speaking of dinner, there I was on Thanksgiving, enjoying my Thanksgiving meal, speaking with the governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, and that's a whole nother story. So, but it was a very pleasant Thanksgiving because she's a very interesting woman. And an interesting political commentator. And in the middle of dinner, I get a phone call from David Ignatius at the Washington Post. This is on Thanksgiving evening.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, this is important. I know David from the Post, not, I'm not close with him. I see him at, Post events and parties and have a friendly relationship with him. He's obviously super well-informed journalist, prolific novelist, so I don't agree with his politics much, but obviously somebody I'm glad to talk to if he wants my opinion. So he calls me and he says he's got this story. The story is that a source had told him, a man who I know, Jim Johnston, who had worked on the church committee, and Johnston had told him, Ignatius, that he had seen a document saying that the CIA had concluded, or the CIA had learned, that the Mexican government had implicated the Cuban government in JFK's assassination. Yes, the old Castro done it theory resurfaces again. So Ignatius asked me, has the CIA ever released a document like that? And I said, no, not to my knowledge. I don't think so. And so that's what he wanted to quote me as saying. Now, but I said also, David, and he didn't quote me on this part. I said, I did a book about the CIA in Mexico and the Mexican security services and looked at, those Mexican security services pretty closely. And I don't believe that they ever said in writing or any other place that the Cubans were involved in Kennedy's assassination.
It was Mann, right? Wasn't Mann the one that was our guy? Mann was thinking that.
Well, I mean, there were people who thought that. U.S. Ambassador to Mexico at the time, Thomas Mann, thought that the Cubans might have been behind it. So, it wasn't an unprecedented thought, but it's not one that the Mexican security services, to my knowledge, have ever talked about. So, um, so Ignatius runs the piece, and the quote says, And I realized what Ignatius was trying to get out of me. He didn't want to get out of me anything about the document might not exist. But he did want to get that my authority saying no such document had ever been released, which I'm happy to say because that's true. Um, but it's like the ABC News thing. Why is he calling me on Thanksgiving? Like, this isn't who killed Kennedy. This isn't, the social security number of the guy on the grassy knoll. It's not like a breakthrough, but it was important to him. So I called him back the next day, talked it over. He put the quote in the story, and the story came out. So it's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, why is he calling me? He's calling me because he needs credibility. He needs to make this story more credible, and he really wants me to do it. Did he have another agenda at work? Well, I have no doubt that his sources at the CIA, will be happy about this story. It draws attention away from the agency's malfeasance in the JFK story and points the finger at Castro. So, people at the CIA may appreciate that. I don't mind. I mean, was I used? Yeah, yeah. But I was also paid the compliment of you're credible, and we want some of that credibility. I'll take compliments where I can get them. I thought that that story was interesting in that the story that Jim Johnston told that he was shown this document in a classified briefing when he was working for the church committee. And so something that he never talked about, he never mentioned it in his book about the Kennedy assassination. So why is he talking about it now? Well, one reason it seems to me is he's following in the footsteps of Tom Piercy, the whistleblower whose story I told, and who told a similar story. He was in a classified environment doing government work, and he saw a JFK document that had never been made public. That's a good story, and I believe Johnston. I believe he saw something. He's not making the story up. He's a serious person. But what did he see? I don't know. And, the church committee, the CIA was very worried about the church committee because the church committee wasn't actually investigating the Kennedy assassination. The church committee was investigating the intelligence community more broadly. And they decided early on they didn't have enough bandwidth to investigate the Kennedy assassination along with all these other things. So the church committee limited itself to investigating the CIA's response to the Kennedy assassination, not its role in the events leading up to the assassination.
Johnston was a principal author of that book, Volume 5.
Yeah, yeah. And so John, that's why I say I believe Johnson. He's a serious person who had a very, important position in that investigation. But it was clear when the church committee was issuing its final report that there was going to be a follow-up investigation that would focus only on Kennedy's assassination. And that was what became the House Select Committee on Assassinations. So there was this sense that was understood at the time that the church committee was going to investigate the CIA's relationship to the assassination or its reporting on the assassination, but not the assassination itself. That would be done later. And so I wonder if when Johnston was shown this document, that wasn't the CIA trying to, pave the way, lay the groundwork for a subsequent investigation and to get out the self-serving allegation that the Cubans might have been behind the assassination and that they were trying to influence Johnston and other people to start thinking about that possibility because, like I say, it was self-serving. I don't know that that's the case. I haven't talked to Johnston to see if there's any more to it than that. I want to, and I certainly hope that, if there is such a document, of course, it should be made public. So we'll see. But it's like the ABC News thing. Why now? Why are you talking about this now? And why are you talking to me since you're obviously not, you're not asking me for my opinion about what happened or your own journalism. You just want my authority. I just have to believe that, the official story and the people who are defending it have the sense that it's not selling very well. And they're trying to bolster its credibility with stories that they think, bolster its credibility. Um, and the Castro done it theory. The Castro done it theory is a nice middle position for people politically because it gets you off the hook of saying, one man alone killed the president for no reason. It gives the crime a political context, and it doesn't let the government off the hook. It shows some dissidence from the government, but it also distances itself from, the majority of the JFK research community, I would say.
It also gives them, it makes them like they were lying for a good reason, right? Because if that came out, then we would have had to go to war.
Yeah. Now,
Faster.
yeah, but th- there's a couple of problems with the Castro Dunn theory. I mean, first of all, this may be a little scholastic for people, but I think that it's true. Um, you know, Fidel Castro was a dedicated Marxist-Leninist, okay? He believed that history was determined by the correlation of historical forces as opposed to the
No.
deeds of great individual men. And as a course of that, in the whole course of struggle for power in Cuba, when it came to assassination, like the early rebels against Batista debated, should we kill Batista? Should we assassinate him as a way of getting rid of the dictatorship? And Castro always said, no, you get rid of one man, you're not changing the system. Whereas Castro's opponents said, no, we believe in assassination. And once Castro takes power, if you look at how people talk about using political violence in the struggle for power in Cuba, you know, Castro didn't rely on assassinating his enemies to prevail. That's not to say that he wasn't ruthless and brutal. He definitely was. But he used socialist legality. He used the socialist system that he had created to prosecute his enemies and to punish them, and sometimes to put them to death. He did not go out and assassinate them on the street. And so that's one point. Now you can say, well, Castro, he's a mean guy, he's a bad guy, he would do anything, so you can't trust him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other problem with the Castro done it theory is, to me, it's self-evident that nobody at the CIA believes it. Nobody. The CIA has never issued a finding or a paper that says here's the case for Cuban involvement in Kennedy's assassination. It has never happened. No investigative committee has ever reached that conclusion. So you have some authors who have done it, and you have these periodic stories that pop up. Oh, people, sources somewhere say that. Well, if some CIA official has credible evidence that Castro was involved in Kennedy's assassination, and that official is not producing that record under the JFK Records Act or under Trump's order, I mean, that person, if they exist, are protecting Fidel Castro or the Cuban government from being held accountable for a heinous crime. No such CIA official has never done that.
And in fact, Jeff, Donald Heath, that's what Donald Heath did. He went down to Miami to determine were the exiles involved, were the pro-Castro Cubans involved? That's
Yeah,
what
exactly. So nobody at the CIA thought that this was a possibility, and are there pro-Castro officials working at the CIA today hiding evidence of Castro's involvement in Kennedy's assassination? I doubt it. I mean, it doesn't strike pro-Castro officials at the CIA. No, I don't believe that. I mean, that are withholding credible evidence in the Kennedy assassination. So, when you push the Castro done it argument, I mean, there's not a lot there. There just isn't.
it was
And
DRE, it was DRE and John Martino and Frank Sturgis who started that story in the days after the assassination.
yeah, and this is something that, Dan Hardway said, in the wake of the assassination, his investigation showed that there were all these stories blaming the assassination on Castro, and they all came from sources cultivated by David Phillips. And Hardway asked Phillips in a pre-interview, what about that? And Phillips couldn't answer. So, that's so if you know the origins of the Castro done it theory among CIA agents, and you know how little evidence there actually is to support it, then you understand that its purpose isn't really airing this story isn't really adding a lot to the history of the assassination. It's more kind of a diversion or a rhetorical tactic to change the discussion. So
It's a limited modified hangout, as we used to say.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but the thing about a modified limited hangout is usually it has some truth to it, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You tell a little bit of truth to hide a lot. But as a modified limited hangout, this doesn't even, the Castro done it theory doesn't even have very much truth to it, so it doesn't even really work as a modified limited hangout because it doesn't it's way too modified. It's more hangout than limited.
I
So
think also we have to say that, you know, we have to admit that the assassination was an intelligence failure, whether you believe it was a conspiracy or not. But if it was an intelligence failure and let's say Cuba did it, Castro did it, then we go into the phase of, well, during the Cold War, when Cuba had a superpower as an ally in the Soviet Union, the CIA had an incentive to suppress its intelligence failure, knowing that Cuba was behind it. Once the Soviet Union collapsed, that rationale also collapsed partially. And then once Castro was dead, it was 10 years ago or so, then it's really collapsed. So, I mean, the idea that they would retain that kind of information now is ridiculous, in my opinion. I
yeah,
mean,
no,
unless,
it strains credulity. Why would any CIA official of any political persuasion whatsoever do that? Why wouldn't they? Of course they would.
well, to
And
maybe
so,
to preserve the myth of infallibility, like it
but
was.
the other problem with this is, you know, again, what's the evidence? Was there any ever a CIA official who said, "Oh God, we really screwed up and Castro did it"? Uh, Nobody from the CIA said that. The lawyers for the mafiosos who were blackmailing the CIA did say that, and that was another point of where you see the Castro done it theory was
Oh, Roselli. Yeah, Roselli in '67 with Ed Morgan when Roselli was trying to leverage that so he wouldn't get deported and wouldn't get jailed.
right. So Johnny
Yeah,
Rosselli, the mobster, is under investigation, about to be deported. So he sends his lawyer Ed Morgan to talk to Drew Pearson,
right.
and he says, "Look." He tells a story that's partially true. Rosselli tells Morgan to tell Drew Pearson, my client, a hoodlum, only identified as a hoodlum. My client says that he was involved in the CIA plots to kill Castro. That's true. And then they sent some assassins to kill Castro. Castro found out about it. He turned around and he sent assassins to go kill Kennedy. That's the origin after 19. That's another origin story of the Castro done it theory. So
That's
from
67.
a mob lawyer blackmailing the president. So what Drew Pearson does is Drew Pearson goes to Earl Warren, right? He goes straight to the source and he says, what do you think about this story? And Earl Warren's very upset because people are already doubting his report and his dignity is offended that anybody's criticizing him. And so Earl Warren says, I don't know what to say about that. He doesn't have an answer.
He goes
But
to Roswell. He
yeah,
goes,
so, but that story was raised in the context of a blackmail attempt, a successful blackmail attempt.
yeah.
How it has to be taken with a grain of salt. Uh, and so, that's another reason to doubt the Castro done it theory is the origins of the people
And
who.
we have the evidence that when Jean Daniel was meeting with Castro the day of the assassination, and what Castro said to him was that your peace effort's over now. It's like Castro was devastated by
Yeah,
he said Kennedy could have had the potential of being a great president. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and another mob connected guy. We mentioned John Martino. The story of John Martino is that he somehow, before the assassination happened, had this, I don't know, premonition or said to somebody they're going to hit him
for
in
not
Dallas. And then he was as fickle as Roselli. I mean, he changed to, yeah, no, it was Castro for sure. But you don't really get the sense that that's what he thought when he said
no,
that.
that's what he said originally. Later in life, he told the more accurate story.
But no, but it changed back in the very beginning. I don't think he said he thought
A couple
Castro
of
had
days
done it. It
after the
was only
assassination.
after it
Yeah.
was only after the assassination that he went ahead and said, "Yeah, no, 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 it was Castro."
He was going on a book tour. He was Castro's prisoner or whatever. And right after the assassination, he started talking on a radio and also writing a piece about Castro being behind it. And then Sturgis also followed up with that. So they were.
But- Right, but when Martino said they're going to hit him when he gets to Dallas, he wasn't saying with they. He wasn't
No,
talking about
no, no,
Castro.
no,
Right.
right,
No.
no, no, no. But Jeff,
Hey,
I got a
let's
story.
take a little, just a word from our sponsors, as they say. If you have a question, raise your hand. You can do that down in the with the React icon.
Yeah,
Uh,
click
down.
on the heart part, and then it'll pop up and give you the option to raise your hand. Anybody who has a
Yeah.
question.
So
Don't
So
Jeff,
click on
heart.
the little arrow.
I thought your article was great. That this is really about trying to offset all the bad information that's been coming out, bad in terms of the CIA, right? Um, this year, and so they're trying to resurrect, and this is like a counterintelligence operation. Um,
It is like a counterintelligence operation. That's a good analogy.
yeah. And then once we finish with the questions, Steve Jaffe's on, and we're going to talk about what the community can try to do because we have, you know, Oliver's written his letter, which is signed by Jim. Jeff's can do something, but they're the interviewees, but then the
Yeah.
community
Yeah,
can.
no, and in fact, I would like this not to be me bitching and moaning about you did me wrong. This it's not about that. Um, and yeah, I would love to have 100 people say, look, we know this case, and that was bad journalism. That
And
would be convincing.
what we're
But it,
doing is we're drafting up a letter that we're going to send to ABC, and we're going to ask the community to. It's like a petition, but it's like a very short couple paragraphs. Chad and I drafted it up, and we're going to post it and ask people to add their name to it.
Okay, that's
and
great.
yeah, and I don't know whether this would happen, but I have shades of Jim Garrison's half hour on NBC in 1967. I'm not sure that's the way to go, but if it were the way to go, I mean, who would do it? I think the only person qualified is Jeff, and I don't suppose. I mean, who's out there to talk like that? And he did not make the kind of message that Jeff would make. But I mean, this is about the JFK files that were released this year.
Right.
That's the big issue. So to talk about that and why
Yeah.
ABC didn't cover it. But
Well,
anyway,
well, let's see if we can't get. I mean, I think the pitch to ABC is do a real show on JFK files and we'll help you. That was a bad show, but we can help you do a good show.
yeah.
Right.
Um, I don't know that that's going to work, but at least they'll be able to hear that.
Jeff, when they contacted you, did the senior or executive producer did they speak to you?
So the top two people are like the top two people at ABC News documentaries, David Sloan and this woman,
Muriel
Pierce-
Peterson.
Peterson. Um, I was contacted first by the producer below them, Eileen Murphy,
Yeah.
and then I was interviewed by another producer. She was like a senior producer, and then I was produced by a regular producer,
Okay.
Kate Muldowney.
Ah.
So that was how the chain of command worked. No, I did not talk to Eileen Murphy. I think I traded emails with her, and she said we'll be in touch. I did not talk to those top people. I mean, those people are grand poobahs, and we'll see if they feel obliged to
It's
respond.
ironic that it's the Truth and Lies series because this clearly fell on the lies side.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so people can answer questions, and then Steve, after we get the couple questions, and we'll turn to you.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Dave, Jim.
Larry and I talked about this before we started. Did you by chance see the documentary The Age of Disclosure?
No.
Okay, well, it's out on Amazon Prime. It's the the post 2017 UAP story. The hearings in Congress, a lot of whistleblowers. Marco Rubio was there. The Kennedy Go to the Moon speech was featured. But I wanted to ask you about Jeff Cruikshank. I think either you talked to him once or you interviewed him, if you remember him, the Australian researcher that has
Yeah.
been looking at the story as it relates to Kennedy.
Yeah.
Do you believe his research or any of the research around this notion of MJ12 using the CIA cryptonym versus MK for like MK Ultra, do you think this MJ12 information has any credibility whatsoever in terms of what's been studied?
I did a bunch of work on this, and I did talk to Jeff Cruikshank, who is an interesting researcher in Australia. I could never establish the validity of those documents. I pressed Jeff, where'd this stuff come from? Where is it held? And he doesn't really want to answer those questions. He wants to believe that these are authentic documents. And so I'm just kind of a stick in the mud in terms of, and I looked at the documents not in relation to JFK assassination, but I was on contract to do some research on UAP for some people and spent a lot of time with it. And so I spent some time with exactly that question of what were the MJ12 documents? What did they show? So I'm not convinced that the documents are authentic. What Jeff said, and what was interesting to me about what he said, had nothing to do with the UAP question, or not nothing, but he talked about how Kennedy had canceled some top secret national security work that involved interfering with Soviet radar systems.
Correct.
And this part I thought was really interesting, and that Kennedy wanted to cancel those because he felt that they increased the chances of nuclear war, of a nuclear accident. By confusing the enemy's senses, you might confuse them into believing that we were attacking them, or that a flock of birds was an incoming missile.
Right.
And so Kennedy canceled one of these programs in November 15th, right before the assassination. I thought that was a really interesting story. Is it related to UAP? I mean, one guy who worked on that program was convinced that the government was hiding evidence of aliens. I went back and forth with Jeff a lot on this, trying to get. I thought that story about the Palladium project was interesting,
Right.
but then it started coming back to, okay, so now we got to, if we're going to run this story, we got to be sure these documents are authentic, because
Right.
if the documents are phony, then the story is going to be BS. And so I could never establish that they were authentic. I'm interested in it, but
Right.
and when you ask people, well, these were documents that were made up to look to be fake, so to fake out the UAP people so that they wouldn't know that we were hiding the bodies at Roswell. I mean, it's a very Baroque argument, and
Right.
to me, it just didn't hold together. So,
Well, so if you put those aside, there's one story in particular in one of the admirals in this story that I think it doesn't require MJ12 that Jeff has reported on, and that is one of the 7 or so nuclear tests that the
Oh,
U.S.
that's great.
conducted, including the triple prime test, which occurred at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's been a declassified video that's at the National Archives. I've seen it, that shows an Air Force video of this test. It shows this was a blast that occurred at the edge of outer space. It was an X-ray bomb. There was a trailing craft, a tag-along craft that followed the rocket. And then when the explosion occurs, there's a craft that falls from the explosion. And the research that Jeff did, and he worked with the Navy Admiral and his wife, the Admiral's wife, that was featured in this documentary, that found classified information that had been declassified about a Navy diver team that had retrieved the craft, and then a former advisor to Secretary McNamara, one of the whiz kids, Harold Malmgren, who just died in February. He has a economics daughter who's sort of verified his tweets that he was making about this. He said that Kennedy and he had asked to be briefed on this test. They were told, and this is alluded to in the documentary, that they did not have the authorized clearance, a Q clearance that DOE has, which is higher than TSSCI. And so Kennedy and Johnson and a bunch of others went to Los Alamos on December the 7th of 1962. You can go watch the video on YouTube. So there's something there about a craft from a nuclear test that happened at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then if you look at a couple of Kennedy's National Security Action Memorandums, I think it's 156 and then his last one, 271, and his speech to the UN, he's talking about collaborating with the Soviets on space. He's talking about not having war in space. He's talking about going to the moon together. And so there's a whole story there around that seems to have credibility, whether the
Well, I
MJ12
think the
was
theory is that we were reverse engineering the alien technology, and he was
correct.
would be willing to share it with the Russians rather than keep this
That
as.
is correct. That is
I
correct. In
just
other
want
words,
people out to who weren't on at the beginning. Dick Russell did a piece, a Substack called "The Age of Deception," which is really interesting, sort of what Jeff was saying, but he's tying the most recent Age of Disclosure special against the one that was done last year with Dr. Greer. But he's saying that this is similar to what's happening with Kennedy now, that they're trying to scare people and also trying to use this disclosure as a way to promote secrecy. So I just encourage people to go to read Dick Russell's latest Substack on this. It's very consistent with what Jeff wrote in his last piece.
Yeah. So Jim, I mean, Kennedy and that those high tech dimensions of the Cold War, that's interesting. That trail of light falling from the test is a space aliens. I see no evidence of that. It's a flash of light on a video. There's nothing about it that establishes an alien spacecraft. Much less alien life, much less Kennedy covering it up. So uh, you know, it's interesting, but to me, I couldn't solidify or verify any of
yeah,
it.
the only part of the story that kind of follows that up is the work that Jeff did with the Navy Admiral, researching the Navy sailors that were on the retrieval craft, the one sailor that was the diver. I mean, there's a whole story around that, and Jeff has spoken about it. Anyway, I don't want to take up
Yeah.
the whole time
Okay.
on that stuff, but I
Yeah.
thought I'd
So
ask you about it.
I looked it over. Um, you know, I, if there was some way that I could do the Palladium story without reference to the MJ12 documents, I would do it.
Okay, fair enough.
So,
I
Thank you.
don't see Dave on, so maybe we should go to Steve. So Steve,
yeah.
we all had a conference call the other day to sort of talk about next steps. So Steve, you want to give your thoughts about what we can do
And
as
we
a
should and we should introduce
Sure.
Steve as a board. I think a board member. I'm not sure if he's the chair. He's a board member of the Citizens Against
Kappa.
Political Assassinations (CAPA),
Yeah.
which did an email shoot for this Zoom call a little bit earlier. So it expands our reach. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I did, getting a
Jim
double,
and Steve, you got PR background, and so you're coming from a perspective. You're in the business.
right. Now I've got two of myself in my ear. I tried to improve my technology,
I gave you
and
have the
all I
right.
seem to have done is, can you still hear me?
yeah,
Yes, I,
yeah.
I gave you the
Okay.
ability to share if you had something you want to share.
Um, I've worked with this group before. I had a client, two clients actually, three clients who were covered in Truth and Lies, and they were also covered in um, 48 Hours with Diane Sawyer. She did a couple of stories. And basically, what I did was I found out that this is the, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
fine.
This is the offshoot of that group. And Kate Muldowney, I had the name wrong before. It was Muriel Peterson. And David Sloan, who's won Emmys and Christophers and Pulitzers and all kinds of awards. But what they're really doing is they're after ratings. They're not after the truth, and the lies come easy.
They
What I
create.
wanted to do was to,
They have a new
uh,
ABC News.
let me see if I can get this technology. Just terrible at this. Get the Bluetooth off and see if I can hear you on. Hello?
Yeah, the sound
Oh,
is fine, Steve.
this
Absolutely
is
fine.
good. Okay. This is my new equipment. Okay. Um, I'm on the board of Kappa, and there is a feeling that there are a lot of people who would like to belong to an effort, a movement, but they don't know how to find the organization. And I'd be willing to, I'm happy to help any organization coordinate with each other, or and what I feel that we need is a barrage of um, technical expertise regarding the the truth regarding all of the information that Jeff and Larry and Chad, etc., that you've all been able to bring out that's come forth with Jim DiEugenio's documentary and Oliver Stone's effort. I think that we need to really focus on David Sloan, this esteemed producer at ABC. Muriel Pearson, she's a managing editor for those who know what a city room looks like. Kate Muldowney did the interviews, and Eileen Murphy set them up. Um, we need to concentrate our effort on ABC right now because they are gauging the response as well as the ratings. And I think that we need to contact them. I'll put a card up on Kappa so that you can reach them. And if you go to CAPA, Google CAPA JFK, you'll get to the website and we'll have that up by Monday.
Steve, are you saying that we contact the executive producer or someone else at ABC? Like, are we going to David Sloan?
Yeah, I think you go to David Sloan and create a problem for him. And if you want the credits, I'll post the credits of the show. But I think that all of the top four producers should get a copy of the letter to David Sloan.
Okay, so I think what we should do, we have a letter that we're circulating amongst the five of us first, right?
Right,
And the question is to get people to add their names, we have to put it on a platform. We could
right.
do it JFK Facts, we could do it some other place. And then what would we do? We would share it like there's a bunch of well-populated Facebook groups. There's the EF. There's Paul Blues and Oliver has 190,000 followers. We would have to put it in a place where people could just add their name. And I don't know whether we do a change.org petition or do we post it on JFK Facts. Jeff, do you have any ideas about that?
I think it should be posted in more than one place.
Well,
Yeah, so do I. I do
well,
as well.
but then you don't have then you don't have one document with all the names.
Well,
I think we
which,
should take out a page in the Washington Post and do the whole petition there in big print. I
yeah,
guess that
that's a
might
great
only
idea.
cost us a few $1 million, but
Yeah. I'm just thinking, I mean, normally like when I did, when I like have done something like to get Thurman Munson in the Hall of Fame, I created a website and then I had the petition there and then we had everyone go to that site to add their name. So I'm just wondering if there's a place because we could share the link to a whole bunch of places to have people go to the sign.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that maybe we could come up with a JFK uh, Truth or Lies, Truth and Lies, I think it was called, um, website and have people go there and refer people there, in addition to having a five-pronged bombardment of them with experts, with facts, with different kinds of attention that is unending and that is relentless, because I think that way we'll get a response. I've already been able to make it known that we are seriously discussing the ABC special this week, as have you. But I've made it clear I haven't been able to get them on the phone, but I've been able to get ABC News on the phone, and it just takes every one of us signing the petition, writing letters, and giving them something that they can't turn away from because it affects ratings.
So again, the question is going to be, where do we put the letter for people to sign? I don't know if we do, Jeff, if we do JFK Facts, or do we could create a separate page, a separate website just for this purpose. I hate to use change.org because that's not as, I think, as powerful. But I'm open to ideas. Jeff, you're muted. There you go.
Um, I'm glad to post it in JFK Facts. I mean, it would be a good idea maybe to have a Google form that people could add their names to.
Yes, yes.
Uh, uh, you know, but the main thing I can do is, I'll run it and, could say sign on in the comments or forward this to ABC News.
Wait, is Karen your webmaster?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what? We can work through Karen. Karen could probably create a page just for this topic on the JFK Facts website.
Hmm.
And then what we could do is then I'm just playing this out loud here.
Yeah.
If we do that, then we could then create that link, and then we go to Kappa, to the Facebook pages, to Paul Blue, to Oliver, and say, please go to this link and add your name to this petition.
Good idea.
And then
Yeah.
we would then at some point, we give people a week or so to do it, and then in the meantime, Steve, you were going to kind of let them know this was coming?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
But I won't let up. I'll let them know every day.
Okay. Do it.
Yeah.
So maybe
Well, I'll post the letter tomorrow, Larry, and let's get this going,
okay. And well, we got to talk to Karen about how you can set it up so people could add their name to the letter, right? It's
Mhm.
Yeah. And Karen is also the webmaster for
right,
Kappa.
right.
Yeah.
Because like when I did the Thurman Munson thing, we have actually we had a link right there. Here's a sign the Thurman Munson Hall of Fame petition. People go right to that and just add their name. It was like, and then I waited a while and then we sent off, 30,000 names.
Mhm.
Excellent.
And then
Yes. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, it's just we'll just reach out to all the different groups that, in the JFK community.
Yeah, and we can invite people to make comments about ideas to expand our horizons on getting in touch with the media. Right now, we have an opportunity to focus on ABC.
Right. Yes, yes. So, all right. So I guess, Jeff, why don't you reach out to Karen to see how, or you want me to do it since I've done it with her already with the
Yeah,
other.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Or
Okay, I'll email her and I'll copy you on it because we want to basically just add a page to the JFK Facts site. The only downside to doing that I can think of is that because you're an interviewee, it may come across that you're self-promoting, but
yeah, no, that's why I don't want to be the lead. I want to be part of everybody else on
okay.
this.
Um, Let me think about. All right, I'll reach out to her to see if we can. Steve, it might be that Kappa becomes the point.
That'll be good.
We
I
could use
think that,
Kappa.
yeah, I'll contact them on behalf of Kappa and say that our entire membership would like to participate in the facts and the truth side and, come up with
I'm saying in
something
terms
that
of
will,
the that Kappa could use its website as the platform for people to go to sign that we put the petition on the Kappa website. So because people
Excellent.
have to go to some place to add their name.
Excellent.
Right? I'm thinking about, this is like modern uh, signatures. It's one place you go to. So I think it'd be better because since Jeff was interviewed, and I just think it'd be cleaner to have like, and this is good for Kappa too. Kappa will get a lot of publicity out of this.
Right. And Jeff should remain as a news source and an expert
Right.
and not a PR person, whereas I don't care.
All right. So Steve, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contact Karen tomorrow. I'll copy you on it because
Okay.
she did the petition for me for Munson, and I'll tell her to do the same thing, but use Kappa. Right. We'll create like a separate page on the Kappa website, and then,
Great.
and then we'll start spreading the word out to the Facebook groups, to everybody to go to this page to add your name.
Excellent.
Okay.
You get in touch with Karen. I'll get in touch with Kappa.
Okay. Cool.
Let's take some other comments.
Dave and then Michael.
Good evening.
Hey, finally.
I have a question for Jeff. Good to see you, Larry, and everybody. Jeff, I have a hard time getting my mind around the fact that an agency has a 62-year allegiance to cover up their mistakes. I mean, I can't fathom how a director of CIA armed with presidential executive order can't get in and find out what's going on with this case. And then my other question, part of that is, who institutionally in the CIA would be controlling their side of the story, or I should say obstructing disclosure of any relevant documents? Where does that responsibility fall within that agency?
The director of operations, the chief of the operations directorate. So that's to answer your second question. That's the person who controls the classified information and who is familiar with the records. When John Ratcliffe or somebody on his staff, they don't know what CIA records to ask about. They don't know anything about the events of 1963. So they're dependent on their own memory banks to retrieve that information. Why doesn't Ratcliffe go do that? I mean, because he doesn't know where to look and he doesn't want to look. I mean, he's done a good job in responding to some of Representative Luna's requests, and that's been helpful and useful. But has he been proactive in releasing JFK records that are in the CIA's possession, that are known to exist and are still secret? No, he hasn't done that, and I don't expect that he will. He's seen some advantage in being more forthcoming, and that's great, but he doesn't know how to solve the crime, and he doesn't really want to.
I have some more information about the CIA, but I'll wait till after the questions are asked because it's in response to the story about the raid, the so-called raid on the warehouse. Michael.
So does that answer your question, Dave?
It does. Thank you, Jeff.
So brief comment and a question. I agree with Steve at Kappa that ABC is probably eager to hear responses, and might even been looking to use this opportunity to pull information from the research community, like, okay, make an argument. So maybe I'm naive to that, but to be able to put forth a compilation of information that they could feel like there's something they can lean on and present something in the future. I mean, I don't know, but it makes a lot of sense to go back to them and say, look, this was just a rehash bordering on insult. I think is a good idea without getting too heated over it. Just, in other words, we don't want to insult them, but we want to provide them with more information. So I agree. The question is, when Castro was having that conversation the day Kennedy was shot, he said everything is going to change.
Yes.
You get the sense that Castro could see that the national security establishment this was a pivotal event, and this was going to be a new pattern indefinitely, for years and perhaps decades to come. I think Castro was someone who would have had that insight. Didn't he give some kind of speech, or wasn't there didn't he go to the Cuban public with a whole hours long speech about how the CIA was going to manipulate and blame Castro and embroider the whole thing? That's
Castro
my
gives a
question.
speech. Castro gives a speech on the night of the 23rd, which is broadcast on TV and radio. Um, and says, there's a Machiavellian plot afoot to blame us for this, and we're not responsible. So yeah, he gives a speech that night, which is, judicious. He's not saying a lot more than what was known. Um,
Mhm.
uh, but saying very clearly that an effort was being made to blame Cuba for this crime.
And I think
So
he even tells Jean Danielle that they're going to end up blaming, you
yeah,
know,
and he said that to Jean Danielle, and he said that same thing in the speech a day later.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, so yeah, Castro was consistent about that, and over the years, in as recently I think as 2013 maybe, he spoke to Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of the Atlantic, and reiterated that was Cuba's view of the crime, that Oswald couldn't have committed it, and the crime emanated from Kennedy's own government. So yeah, that's
I think he also spoke to RFK Jr. Um, and he said he'd be crazy to try to kill the president. But I believe he also did. He said he did at some point say that they did their own study, and that it just was not possible.
yeah,
The way.
yeah. No,
Hi there. You know, there's you guys bring so much to the table that by the time you get to ask the question, you already have four more questions that you thought about, and then that are all rushing and competing with each other as I try to decide which one I'm going to land on.
okay. Well, pick one at random.
You know what? I'm going to go back on. Let me try to cobble it together a little bit better. I'll
Okay,
go back.
well,
I'll wait another couple minutes.
Okay, take a little time, Sean, and we'll hear from Leo.
Yeah, Leo's another guy in the business.
There we go. Here we go. Hello. Hi there.
Hi.
To Steve, hi there, Steve Jaffe. Yes, ratings is, of course, their number one obsession. But I think we have a really good argument because by actually making a counter program about what really happened, the conspiracy and everything we've learned since ARRB, it's right, the ratings will soar because people have seen the lone nut thing for 50 years now on television. There hasn't been any major network television program that actually showed the American public the conspiracy. This would be, great for ABC ratings. So that's why I would say that would be a good argument. And then, Jeff, I just want to make a comment. You said it should be about the recent document releases. Wouldn't that be a little bit too limiting? Wouldn't it be better to have a show about everything we've learned since the Assassination Records Review Board closed, and we still have, we have so much more we know now?
I mean, looking at the totality of the evidence is always a good idea. When you're talking to people in the news business, I always emphasize the thing that's absolutely the newest.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Not a year old, yesterday, because
Yeah.
that's what people in the business are about. So, so what I say is the last 2 years, not, to go back to the review board. No, we're not talking about 20 years. We're talking about this just happened in the last 2 years. That's the argument I like to make.
Okay.
And can I just add one thing to that? What Jeff said about the last 2 years takes into account that in 2021, so Oliver Stone did these documentaries that were actually pretty expansive and dealt with things that were released by the Assassination Records Review Board. But in the last 2 years, we've had, or I guess maybe two and a half, we've had the complete Oswald file declassified, and anything that would be made now would have the George Joannides personnel file as a just like a kind of having a kind of lion's share of coverage. But while the thing was being made, there would probably be more things coming out. So you could make easily a feature that is as long as the ABC one was, and
Right.
have it much more substantive and densely filled with just stuff that we've had even just this year. But if you extended it back to 2023, you're talking
We have to
about
get the
year
Parker
by year.
doctors too. But Leo, the animation that John's working on, it's going to look like the Zapruder film. It is not going to be the cartoon that Dale Myers has. This is going to be realistic. I mean, they even have like the covers on the meters, on the parking meters.
Excellent. I love it. Yes. But one more thing I wanted to add. I wish the fairness doctrine was still in effect,
Yes,
which
yes,
unfortunately was canceled under Reagan. Isn't that how Garrison got onto the Tonight
yes,
Yeah,
Show?
yeah,
yes, it is.
And this is just, this would be a perfect example to have a 1 hour counter program show following the fairness doctrine.
right.
Wishful thinking. Okay.
Okay, Sean, you figured out what you want to talk about?
Narrowed it down. So, so I guess my question really is about media. And I was wondering, since I'm new here, have you made the same efforts to get at places with the larger audiences? Because it's my understanding that ABC, CBS, NBC, none of these garner the kind of audiences that direct to consumer infotainers. And I'm forgetting the name of the most well-known one, but you know who I'm talking about. He used to do
Joe
a
Rogan.
quote unquote reality show where he would make people eat all sorts of horrible things.
Yes, we've reached out to every major outlet for years. We've been doing that.
And Jeff's been going on,
I mean,
Fox News. He's been on, on MS Now, I guess it's now called, right?
But actually Sean makes a salient point that I hadn't really thought of. I mean, we know what the major media outlets are from a legacy perspective, but just based on the coverage, the initial like media bursts that we witnessed and tracked for example, Joannides file, which was on the front page of the Washington Post in July. There are some podcasters who have so much following, millions of followers. If they wanted to broadcast a movie, they could do it, and they would have millions of followers, and it would. I'm afraid to say ABC would look. I mean,
No, you're
possibly.
right.
it's a
You know what I
joke.
mean? It's
It's a
it's
joke.
like, yeah, I mean, Russell Brand, I mean, I don't watch his stuff, but I know that he has 11 million whatever followers on whatever it is, and it's all Rumble and X and all the rest of it. I mean, get one of these guys' attention. They are interested in it. Steve Bannon has a huge number of followers. I mean,
That's why I went on Steve Bannon's show.
Yeah.
yeah, and so did Mark Caputo. And I mean, I don't think he's particularly a fan of
So,
Steve Bannon either, so.
yeah, we've done this. Look, if somebody wants to get in touch with me offline and say, I'll devote 5 hours a week to contacting these 5 podcasters, I'm all ears. To sit around and bitch and moan about it here, I mean, we need to do that, but it's more important for somebody to say, I'm going to spend 5 hours doing this because I've spent lots and lots and lots of time doing it. And if somebody
Yeah.
wants to help, contact me and sign up, and we'll do it.
Yeah, I was just, I would never imagine any of the mainstream media venues to give us a fair shake at all. I mean, this
Well,
is exactly what I would expect from them.
yeah.
Yeah, how about
So,
You know what they do. They're not anybody that calls themselves news nowadays generally isn't, it seems to me. And people govern themselves accordingly. I mean, I don't think they have
feel free
any
for
credibility. I don't think you have anything to worry about.
yeah. Okay,
I'm trying to reach lots of people, and ABC News is one way to do that. So,
It's an additional one. I understand. Okay.
Greg.
Yeah, a couple things, Jeff, and anybody else. Is there any conferences or any presentations in Dallas that somebody saw they're just must see that were really over the top? Number one, and number two, we've gotten information out of Russia and the CIA, but is there any information from Mexico City and or Cuba that we can get our hands on that or should be looking at or uh, as an angle to find out more information?
Um,
I don't know of anything that's come out of Mexico or Cuba recently.
Craig Bozart had a really interesting presentation on the Z film he did some modern analytics to try to show why he thinks it's not altered. It was only a 20-minute presentation.
Is that the young man, the young guy?
Well,
He's pretty young.
he's not that young. No, no, no. He
Okay, I'm thinking of a different guy.
Groden introduced him, and I'm going to invite him on and give him an hour because I mean it was pretty compelling. We've been going back and forth on that. That was a pretty good presentation. But I was only listening to the JFK Historical Group. I don't know what Lance. I didn't listen to any of the Lancer presentations. Uh, Michael, is that your hand up from before? Michael Terrell?
I guess he asked his question.
Okay. So let me just so last week we also talked about the story that dropped um, about the fact that in April DCI Gabbard had put together a team and they went to a facility, a CIA facility, to look at records. Um, I learned that actually the person who was in charge of that team was Amaryllis Fox, Bobby Kennedy's daughter-in-law. And I didn't realize this at the time, but she has 3 jobs right now. She's a member of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. She's a deputy DNI for policy and capabilities. And she's the associate director for intelligence and international affairs for the Office of Management and Budget. And apparently, she put together this group and they went into this facility. And she's essentially the point person within the CIA now. Bobby basically embedded her into the CIA to try to get documents and get information. So I reached out to her today. What was unclear to me from the story was we had a document drop on April 3rd, but all those documents had RIF numbers. And it's unclear to me if the documents they were looking at were documents that had not been seen by the ARB. If so, they would not have RIF numbers. So one of my asks to her is, were these documents that they looked at, were they released in April 3rd, or are they still not released? And if not, are they going to declassification review? So Bobby gave me her email, and I reached out to her. And supposedly they're working with a whistleblower, but none of my contacts know the whistleblower's name, so I don't know. I've and Jeff, you've also asked, so no one knows this person's name.
Yeah, I mean, that story, I mean, there were several versions of it. The Reuters one seemed the most solidly reported. But it said they visited the archive, but it didn't say that they obtained anything. It said that Amaryllis Fox spent most of her time talking about the digitization of documents, not the locating or recovery of them. So it wasn't a very satisfying story. And, to call it a raid on the archive is, not true. That's not what happened. It sounds like it was a kind of tense confrontation because it was a, secure facility, and Fox didn't actually have the security clearance to get in there, although she was let in. So, what was going on there? Yeah, let us know, Larry, because that story wasn't very clear. And that's the question. What did they get something? What did they get? Where is
Right,
it?
right. And Bobby said to me that she spends most of her time in a skiff now, which suggests she's got some clearance, right? I mean, that is that blue clearance, or is that can you be below
I mean,
blue?
different skiffs have different,
Okay.
different requirements. So
But I
yeah.
wonder, I honestly have to wonder, how does Amaryllis Fox know what to look for? I mean, JFK Facts did a fairly kind of, I mean, it was fairly nebulous, but specific enough article in a few days after the task force was announced, which is JFK Most Wanted. It was a list of 15 files, and in each case there was a, like, in parentheses, I guess, location or where it was generally thought to be. I mean, what do these people know? I
Bobby
mean,
told me that they were working based where they were working with the whistleblower.
with a whistleblower.
Yeah, he gave me his name, and I gave it to Jeff, and I also gave it to some other people to who are, in that represent whistleblowers, see if they know this guy. And no one knows him so far, but Bobby said to me that this is the person that they relied on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, not.
I just think it's interesting that Bobby has, the first heard that he wanted her to be have some position, right? And then she didn't get it, and now she's got three positions.
Yeah, but I wonder, there was something, it had something to do with, uh, I think he was trying to make her a deputy director of the CIA, and that was a bridge too far.
It doesn't got to get confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, Tom Cotton had some problems with that. He
Yeah, but
stepped up.
now, but she's. I mean, if you look at the chart, I mean, the deputy. Where was that? Here, I sent that to you. The deputy DNA for policy and capabilities that's a pretty senior position when you look at the chart. So I guess it's not something that has to be uh that you have to get confirmation for. But
Yeah,
anyway,
but you got to remember that the deputy director of operations
right.
doesn't get need to be confirmed. The only three positions are the director, the inspector general, and the general counsel.
Yeah.
So the deputy director, at least if you're to believe Oliver Stone's scene in Nixon, is a dog's buddy that goes and gets tea and coffee for people.
But it looks like Bobby has tried to embed her into the CIA to try to. I'm reading between the
Right,
lines.
right. Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. I think it's good. She has an OMB position that's apparently has some clout. I mean, they've done what they could, but the point is, the deputy director of operations apparently is someone named David Marlowe. If nobody knows what his face looks like, and I mean, yeah, if he's the guy with all the power, then and he's on the seventh floor or whatever it is, right? I mean, how you get to him and convince him? I mean, it's like, hey,
And by
look.
the way, the Fox Nation piece I thought Jeff was interesting when they were showing all the scanning that was going on. They're wasting their time right now scanning the Warren Commission reports. It's like, I mean, we already have those online elsewhere. Why is NARA spending their time? They show the machines that they're using. It's like, why are they doing this? It's like, anyway.
Why don't we send this woman a little roadmap of where to look and create a bridge to her directly?
Well, I mean, that's why I asked Bobby if I could reach out to her, and he gave me her email address. So, I mean, that's why I'm trying to get information where they are with this.
I'm not sure that every bit of Warren Commission evidence is digitized. I mean, obviously, almost all of it is. But, I was looking for something recently, which was the interview by the FBI of Guy Bannister in I don't know, it was like 4 days after the assassination. Find that online. I mean, I know kind of what it says. They didn't ask him about Oswald. They didn't ask him about 544 Camp Street. It was a very anodyne and evasive interview, but you should still be able to find it online, and it supposedly was provided to the Warren Commission.
Yeah, they
Where
had a
I,
picture. They were had picture of these guys taking the volumes and scanning them.
right. Well, that's silly. Yeah,
That,
that is definitely silly.
the
That is,
concerns they have, that's crazy.
yeah, that is silly. That is silly.
Yeah.
Anyway, but at least they are actively scanning documents. Just um, okay.
We've
Sean, is
been on for an hour and 17. Sean still has his hand up. I don't
that
know
enough,
whether that's
Dan?
inadvertent or
You have another question, Sean?
I was just going to comment that they probably get paid by the hour.
yeah.
And folks, I know some are throwing some smack in the chat about NARA. Remember, the government was shut down for several months. So, and they have 1.5 people working on the JFK collection, right, Chad? So
Yeah, there's a ton of people. I heard for some reason the number of 80 working kind of like nonstop sticks in my mind, but it could be even more.
there are a
I don't
lot
know
of
where they,
people in that scanning room.
yeah, lots of people.
But so, they haven't had a chance to, I mean, nothing could happen for months because they were shut down. So, anyway, and these are JFK files. Supposedly there's going to be an MLK hearing, but as we know, there's only, Congress is going to go out on recess soon, and they have so many limited days of hearing scheduled for this month. So it's probably going to be in January.
Right.
Um, okay. Jeff, have you spoken to Luna's office lately?
I have not.
I think, James, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Real quick, just I find the Thomas Piercy
Yeah.
story. I don't know that it's gotten much traction outside of Axios. I can't say I'm totally surprised, but it just seems like there could be more opportunities to try to get that out. But more importantly, any progress or what's the kind of next steps in terms of trying to actually obtain that document that he's identified? Follow-up story.
I have talked with Representative Luna about that, and we're going to try and connect him. We're going to connect him with the CIA contact who's working on JFK files and get them to get Tom to tell the CIA how to go find that document. So we are going to do that.
Great.
Someone asked, I missed the beginning of the Zoom session. Where can I find it recorded? It'll be up in a couple days, right?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yeah.
All right. So unless anyone else has any questions, we managed to get 125 people without Bob Saltzman.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you everybody for coming. Pay attention to Kappa site and JFK Facts for how to sign on to the letter to pressurize ABC. We'll be moving on that. And like Steve says, the more people they hear from, the better, because they do pay attention to ratings.
Yeah, that's true.
Any closing remarks, Steve?
Well, in the long period of time I've been writing a book, I wanted to test some of the material that wasn't as important as the real crux of the book. But so I had a friend who is the editor and publisher of the National Enquirer, who had been after me for a long time to write some articles based on my time with Garrison. And so things like this sewer investigation that I conducted 4 o'clock in the morning. I agreed to write some articles for them. And what they said to me, and this is the tabloid area, what they said to me was that the JFK story covers got all of their 17 million readers' attention, and that that they wanted more and more. And I said, well, I have to stop because otherwise I won't have anything to put in the book. But the point I'm trying to make is that what ABC does with that Truth and Lies show is capitalize on whatever it is that gets ratings. And the Kennedy story gets ratings, and they want to do more. And so that's why it's not just the mainstream media, but specifically now that ABC has reared its head, I think that by a constant barrage and this petition, I think that we will get some good response. And I encourage everybody to stay on it.
Okay. We'll
Okay.
keep in touch.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
See you next
Have a
week.
good
Hey, everybody, I wanted to call your attention to one surefire way to deepen your knowledge of the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's to read my 3 books about the CIA, a trilogy of spies that tells how the assassination actually unfolded in the eyes of CIA insiders. You see, my work on JFK's assassination is rooted not in the literature of conspiracy, but in the history of CIA operations. And that makes all the difference when it comes to understanding the events that culminated on November 22nd, 1963. You'll want to check out my 3 CIA books that tell the story of the founding generation of the Central Intelligence Agency and what 3 insiders actually thought about JFK's assassination. Meet charismatic Station Chief Winston Scott as he surveils Lee Harvey Oswald 6 weeks before Dallas. Meet urbane CIA Director Richard Helms as he fends off President Richard Nixon's attempts to blackmail him over JFK's assassination. Meet James Angleton, the ingenious, paranoid, and sinister counterintelligence chief who had controlled the agency's file on Oswald since 1959. In these books, you'll see the real historical foundation of the events that led to President Kennedy's assassination, and you'll understand this event in a much deeper way. Check out my books at jeffersonmorleybooks.com. You can buy all of these books there, as well as my other nonfiction book, Snowstorm in August. So check out the Trilogy of Spies.